Hello, YouTubers. Joe Kersey here on Saturday, January 4th, 2014 at 1300 Eastern Time. (1800 Zulu time). Now, it's been a while since I talked to you all because, quite honestly, I didn't have much to say. We've had a certain amount of snow here that hit us here about, well, we got 4.5 to 5 inches. A certain amount of that's sort of sublimed off, you know, when the sun hits it. The mail carrier made a sort of a frenzied pass down past the mailbox yesterday, and they didn't stop and leave any mail. I don't know whether we didn't have any mail or they just didn't want to risk trying to get out of the edge of the road, but you know, the stuff on the edge of the road isn't that deep. So, I mean, she stopped over at the other two neighbors, you know, on their unshoveled out areas around their mailbox without any trouble. So, who knows? We shall see. Now, I guess starting late, well, tomorrow afternoon sometime, we're going to get one of these, another one of these winter stormy things coming in, and that's, well, you know, you get the weather hysterions going into overdrive on this kind of thing. I mean, I think a lot of that's CYA activity. But nonetheless, from time to time, this time of year, that stuff does happen. Particularly when this stuff sort of barrels in from the southwest, when you've got something also coming down from the northwest merging together. This reminds me of this blizzard of 1977 here in Ohio. It was last week in January. And that was probably the coldest weather I've ever experienced in my life. And Faith and Thomas and I were living down on North 4th Street there in Columbus, and we had a big old drafty house, and it was heated by gas. And just say the whole time this furnace was running the entire time. And the wind was very hard. I mean, you could feel the wind blowing in through the doors and the windows. I mean, you could sit in a room and you would feel a very focused draft coming from either the door or the windows. You know, we finally resorted to furnace taping around the windows, and even furnace taping around the door once we realized, you know, once we knew we weren't going to go out in that. And I had a thermometer out on the back porch there that we could see from the window, and it was 30 below zero. That's the coldest I've ever experienced. We got a fair amount of snow with this. We got, you know, we had snow up to my waist, so we had snow that was 2.5 to 3 feet deep in places, and the city wasn't able to plow all of it, and it wouldn't have mattered anyway because when I went out and tried to start the car, the radiator had frozen. Fortunately, it did not burst. This is with a 50-50 antifreeze mixture, so I guess 50-50 ethylene glycol doesn't protect you down to 30 below. It didn't that time anyway. So I had to walk to work down at University Hospital, which is about 2.5 miles away, and so walk to work. You know, you bundle up as best you can and plow your way through the snow. I started. Well, I had to be there at 6:30, so I started at a little after 4 in the morning. This was an anesthesia, so I mean, it wasn't like surgery where, well, I mean, you have to be there, but you know, basically, the operating room ain't going to start until you get enough people to run it. So, I mean, it wasn't like I was being casual about it, but, you didn't have that sort of sense of dread hanging over you like you did when you were on surgery. So I did that. I think I did that about 4 or 5 days before I was finally able to get the car to run. And, the temperatures got up. Oh, well, once the temperatures sort of got up, to like 5 below, well, see, the issue was I couldn't, once the radiator was frozen, I had to wait till it warmed up a bit. So. I didn't mind walking too much. Once the roads or the sidewalks and roads were open, I could walk down the middle of the roads once they plowed the roads because I'd go early. And, I used to walk to work a lot anyway. It's only in the summertime, springtime. And then, of course, the following year, actually, this was just a few days later. This was actually more in the first week of February. We had the blizzard of '78, which actually was a blizzard in the sense of far more snow. I mean, both of these, I mean, '77 you had like minus 30, a lot of snow. '78 you had minus 20 and a lot more snow. So, this brings to mind the old story about these guys, these old boars that said he in danger of becoming an old boar. I remember when I had to walk 10 miles in the snow to school. That line of nonsense that you had to listen to when you were a kid. Yeah. Okay. But I will tell you something I had to do as a kid. My dad was a sometime raiser of cattle and hogs, and I mean, he kept anywhere from 10 to 17 Hereford beef cattle in the back field. It was more of a hobby for him. I mean, I rarely remember any of these things being trucked off to be, slaughtered and turned into meat. I remember we went back to the pond and chopped holes in the ice of the pond back there so they could drink water. We did that a lot. We'd go back on the tractor with that. Now, when we weren't going back to chop holes in the pond for them to drink water, what we did was we had a pump up in the other field. We had a pump and a trough up in the other field, and so twice a day we'd go up there and chop the ice out of that trough and pump water out of the pump for the cattle. I don't know why we didn't bother to go all the way back to the pond. Anyway, this is what was, this was the regime, and when your dad is calling the shots, that's what you do. So, he would take care of it in the morning. Now, Lord knows how he did that. I don't know. He may have ridden back on the tractor and done. See, the thing is, this pump needed to be primed. This wasn't a self-priming pump. This was a iron handle, pump the water out, pump. And you had to take water back there, and of course you had to start out with it being very hot. Because it's going to be cold by the time you don't want to be frozen by the time it gets back there, because you got to pour this thing down the pump to prime it so you can pump the water out for the cattle. And then afternoon after school, it was my task once I hit around 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there. After I was about 10 or 11 or 12, he pretty much had gotten rid of the cattle, or they had died off. Anyway, you got to take care of these animals. So, you know, now, see, some of this was before I was allowed to drive the tractor because my feet couldn't hit the pedals yet. So I went back there with my buckets of water, steaming water. And you're going, you're slogging through the fence rows and things, And I'll tell you right now, this didn't occur to me until many, many, many years later. But I just wasn't adequately dressed for this. Largely because we didn't have the money to buy the clothes. That's why. I was well cared for. I mean, I have no gripe, but in retrospect, I realized we didn't have money for a lot of stuff. We just didn't. God bless him. So I went back there. You go back. It probably took. Well, I don't know. Well, it was about a quarter of a mile out there and a quarter of a mile back. But you're walking through snow and you're a tiny, weefy, wimpy guy like I was and am. Well, not so tiny, but I'm still weefy and wimpy. And the cattle were always glad to see you because they knew that they were going to get water. They had hay in the barn. See, there was a barn farther back, and we'd stop on the way home from school. My dad and I would stop on the way home from school. We'd throw hay down for them in the barn. But there wasn't a pump at the barn. There wasn't any water at the barn. So the cattle would go to the barn to eat hay and stuff, and then they'd go to this trough out in the top field there to drink water. And they knew when you were going to water them. Yeah, because they wanted to stay alive too, didn't they? Yes, they did. Right up to that time when either the ball peen hammer hits them or the electric shock goes up their behind. They didn't know about that though, until right just before it happened. So you'd go back there and you'd pour the water, and you don't want to spill anything because you always want to be sure. Because sometimes the thing didn't prime all that easily. I can't say I remember a time when I had to come back and collect more water, but there were times when it was a damn near close run thing. I'll tell you that. So. So that's about it. Now, we're anticipating this, I guess, Monday and Tuesday of next week, or, into Wednesday, we're going to be well below zero for those 3 days, 2.5 days anyway. So God bless us all on that little endeavor. But, we've had below zero weather up here before. We've had a couple of Januaries where we've had, 2 weeks in each January, where we've been below zero for pretty much the bulk of 2 weeks. And 2 weeks after we moved up here in 1982, we had a big party for people in the OR. Come up to Joe and Paul's place, and it was 17 below zero that night. In fact, a couple of people who didn't want to drive home, they slept over on the floor, and their radiators were frozen. So we ended up driving them home, and 2 or 3 days later, they had to get a tow truck out here to, well, No, they didn't get. Well, we had to get a tow truck out there because they had pulled off. See, they had pulled off to the side, and in the meantime, we had gotten themselves sort of snowed in, and uh, when it's that cold, you can't. Everything turns into ice. I mean, it's like a block of ice. They have to take an axe, And we tried to cut them out with. We had a mattock and shovels. To no avail. So the tow truck had to cable this guy out to the road, from the road. That was a great. That was a great party. I tried to do that every year about the same time, but people seem to remember the sort of disastrous effects of the first one, and so attendance dropped off thereafter. Well, on that note, I'm going to say bye-bye, YouTubers, and we'll see what transpires here over the next few days for us. Again, I think you soldier on. That's what you do. Okay, bye-bye.